We're back with another episode of App Stories. Today's episode is brought to you by Clean My Mac X and SetApp. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing great. We have a great pre-show today that we talked all about earbuds. We actually talked about 3 different sets of earbuds that you and I have been testing recently. Some of these we may write about at some point, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. But if you want to hear kind of the latest about some Sennheiser earbuds, Beats earbuds, and Techniques earbuds, it's all in the pre-show. And you can get the pre-show by subscribing to App Stories Plus. You can go to appstories.plus to just subscribe to the show, or you can become a Club Mac Stories Premier member where you get that App Stories plus a whole bunch of other stuff. Lots of pluses here. So just go to plus.club to learn more about Club Mac Stories, all the benefits, including App Stories Plus. Okay, Federico, it is time to start talking about what's coming in the fall. This is a preview episode for iOS 18 and iPadOS 18, which you have just written your story that we published on Mac Stories all about it. I'm doing macOS. We'll talk about that next week. But right now, there are people wondering whether they should install the public beta. Is it stable? What are the features? What can I expect? And that's what we're going to try to do today, is answer those kind of questions.
So obviously there's, as I mentioned in my article, there's the big missing feature or family of features, I guess, which is Apple Intelligence.
Right.
And that's not here today in the public beta. As we know, Apple Intelligence will be a staggered rollout, going by the features that Apple announced to WWDC. We know that many of them are not even coming this year. The Siri integration with apps and Siri becoming capable of performing actions inside of apps, that's coming in 2025. We don't have in this public beta, there's no redesigned Siri. There's no image playground app. There's no make a custom emoji feature. There's no redesigned mail with categorization. There's no create a memory in photos based on a sentence. Like, there's no Apple Intelligence in the public beta. So if you're the type of person who heard that Apple was going to do AI in the next version of the iPhone operating system, and you thought, I want to check that out, well, that time is not today.
Right.
I would also say that if you're the type of person who was hoping that iPadOS 18 would fix all of your problems with iPadOS 17, well, this is not that time either, because there's very little work being done in terms of iPad-specific features. I'm pretty sure I can count the iPad-only features, like there's 2 of them this year.
Yeah.
That would be Apple Pencil Smart Script, which is a feature that straightens and refines your handwriting, and the new look for tab bars and sidebars in iPadOS 18. But yeah, there's, at the very least, though, I will say that iPadOS gets all the features of iOS this time around.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say, to be fair, there is a lot of overlap between iOS and iPadOS.
There's a lot of overlap. So at the very least, they're getting, iPadOS is getting Control Center, the home screen changes, everything this year, instead of waiting until next year, as historically has been the case. And lastly, in terms of disclaimer up front, I will say this public beta is based on the 3rd developer beta of iOS and iPadOS 18, which in my experience has been more unstable than the previous 2 betas. My phone still gets hot. The battery doesn't last as long as it used to. And keep that in mind if your iPhone or iPad are like critical devices, or if you're traveling right now, wait until you get back home, maybe, to install the public beta. Don't do it while you're traveling.
Right. If you don't mind me interrupting here, Federico, even though we're not going to talk about Mac OS until next week, because that public beta is out too, I think I would kind of second what you just said about the iPad and iPhone OSs, because the Mac OS Sequoia, the 3rd beta, the third developer beta, which is what the public beta is based on, is less stable than the first two as well. There are there are features that don't work, and I've had more problems, increasing problems over the course of the last month of using Mac OS. But that said, it's not like I'm losing data or anything like that. It's just that it's a little rough around the edges right now, which is not entirely unexpected or unusual for this time of year. But you should go into it eyes wide open and always have a plan B and not put a beta on a kind of mission critical device that you can't live without something, because you need, if you absolutely need a particular app or feature that breaks, you need to have an alternative. And I've got that with a laptop, but some people don't.
So what do you want to talk about? I mean, really for iPadOS, I feel like, and I mentioned this in the article, I'm mostly going to focus on iOS 18, and I think that's also going to be the case for my review later this year, because there's basically nothing iPad specific to say that I haven't already said a couple of months ago with my article about the issues of iPadOS.
Yeah.
And I feel like I don't want to repeat myself. That story is out there. You can find it on Mac Stories. iPadOS 18 does nothing to fix those limitations and problems of iPadOS, and I don't wanna rehash myself. So
right.
I like to mostly just focus on iOS.
Well, let me ask you this about one of the iPadOS specific features, which is the handwriting refinement, I guess is the best way to term it. Because what it does is it's meant to smooth out your handwriting so that it still looks like your handwriting, but it just looks nicer. And at least as of the very first developer beta, I know there were some people who felt like it made their handwriting look worse. How does yours look?
I have no idea because I haven't used it. I don't use the Apple Pencil.
Okay. All right. Now I've used it myself.
I never handwrite anything.
Okay. I've used it myself a little bit just to see how it works, and it's been fine with my handwriting. I just know I have heard from at least a couple of people in our Club Mac Stories Discord who said that it doesn't make their handwriting look good. It actually, they think, makes it look worse. And I don't know if that's probably a very subjective thing, and I don't know what's going on there, but I wouldn't be surprised if it evolves a little bit over the course of the betas too.
Yeah, based on my handwriting, like I think that anything would be an improvement, but yeah.
You're probably right. I've seen your handwriting.
Yeah, it's terrible. So, yeah, but and it's terrible because I never handwrite because I have a keyboard. Why would I want to handwrite? Anyway, yeah, I don't use the Apple Pencil. Okay. So, yeah. So for my article, so I published an article on Mac Stories with sort of divided into three main sections: productivity apps, the photos redesign, and customization. Specifically, home screen customization and control center. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot more about iOS 18 that I will address in my review later this year. And this article in July, as you know, because we do it every year, this is not the place for a comprehensive look at every little change in every single system app or every single system feature.
Right.
There's a lot that I didn't cover, and that's by design.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Clean My Mac X. Clearing up space on your devices can make such a difference in performance. I've been using Clean My Mac X for years and years now, really since the very first time it was introduced, because it does such a fantastic job. Not just cleaning up junk and unwanted files, but finding large files that you could maybe offload to external storage, looking for malware, and tuning up your Mac by running various scripts that can do things like free up memory and the like. Junk files, hung processes, and malicious apps can slow down even the latest, most powerful Macs. Maintaining your Apple machine, whether it's old or new, is essential for smooth macOS performance. Clean My Mac X is an all-in-one Mac maintenance tool that takes care of old junk, faulty apps, and malware in an efficient, aesthetically pleasing, and hassle-free way. You can monitor your Mac's health, CPU load, and more too. Clean My Mac X is notarized by Apple and available on the App Store, and it aligns with any new changes coming to iOS users. Clean My Mac X was also featured in Forbes, 9 to 5 Mac, TechCrunch, and VentureBeat. With nearly 30 million downloads and 15 years of experience, this app is a must-try for Mac users. As Apple continues to pack Macs with innovative features, Clean My Mac X ensures your hardware remains healthy and running at peak performance, so you can enjoy a seamless macOS experience. All App Stories listeners get 15% off plus a 7-day free trial. Check out the link in the show notes or go to bit.ly/CMMX App Stories. That's bit.ly/CMMX App Stories, or click the link in the show notes. Our thanks to Clean My Mac X for their support of the show.
There's a few things, and there's a few aspects that I want to go over with you, and there's like a recurring theme that I want to mention now instead of at the end, because I think it'll frame how we discuss iOS 18 today with this public beta without AI. And my sort of idea behind the article is that Apple Intelligence, missing right now from iOS 18 is this big missing looming feature that's looming over, the operating system. Everybody's waiting for it. It's going to be the discourse this year, but it's not here yet. So where does that leave iOS 18? And I think it leaves iOS 18 in a place where people like you and I can still appreciate it, but maybe people unlike us will find it boring. And what I mean by that is, even without Apple Intelligence, there are a lot of app-related changes and new features that obviously you and I doing a podcast called App Stories will like.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a big focus on customization. So customizing your home screen even more, even though it's not for me, I appreciate the options. And really, I'm in love with the new Control Center. So the ability to fully customize Control Center with multiple pages, resizable controls, and third-party controls. So my thesis is that even without AI, I'm relieved that I can still like iOS 18 because of the customization and the changes to some of my favorite apps.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting perspective. And I tend to agree with you. I mean, I've been playing around with the iOS and iPadOS betas too. And especially when it comes to things like Control Center, I really enjoy playing around with Control Center, and I'm dying to get more third-party apps in there. I've only got one at the moment, but I'd love to see more get in there because the Control Center in particular is much better than it was before.
Yeah, so I feel like Control Center is going to be the thing where I'm going to spend hours and hours tweaking and fiddling and trying controls from third-party developers, because I think this is the area where power users will have the most fun in iOS 18. When it comes to customization, obviously you have the new home screen customization features and Control Center. It's sort of divided into these two main branches. For the first time in years, I feel like the home screen customization stuff is not for me. I think those features are welcome and long overdue, but they're not for people like me. And what I mean by that is that you now have the ability to rearrange icons freely on the home screen,
right?
Create dynamic layouts with like empty spots in between icons, or place icons however you want. Maybe you want to frame the subject of your wallpaper better and you want to, create an L-shaped home screen layout with icons. You can. I'm never going to do it because first of all, I don't use photos as my wallpapers. I don't have a subject to frame. I know that tons of people do, and I'm okay with it. I tend to prefer using a single home screen instead of multiple home screens. And because of that, I fill it to the brim with icons just for maximum efficiency. I just want to have a single page with all my favorite icons. So why would I waste space on the single page that I have to have a fancy layout? And I know it's a boring approach, and it's fine because I think the beauty of customization is to let people choose and give people the option and the freedom to do whatever they want. The one home screen feature that I'm using is the ability to make icons larger and hide their text labels, which is something that I enabled last month, and I stuck with it, and I cannot go back to the previous small size icons on the home screen.
Don't you think they look? Don't you think they look too chunky? I tried it, and I thought it looked strange.
No, I like it.
Okay,
I like it. Now, when I go back to the small ones, they look like I don't know. They look too clinical or something, and I really dislike the text labels under the icons. I think it's so much cleaner this way.
Oh, I definitely like that. It takes away the text labels. I agree with that. Yeah.
The other home screen feature that I'm never going to use is the icon tinting and icon theming. Icons can now be turned to a dark mode version, which is cool, even though they're not for me. I never use dark mode because I find not even at night, because I find dark mode too low contrast for my eyes. I know there's plenty of folks who use dark mode even during the day. So imagine the spectrum of preference, right? When it comes to using a computer. And it's fine because different people have different tastes and different needs. So I think it's great that you can now have a dark mode icon sort of matching your system appearance. You can now have dark icons, but you can also tint icons, which is basically like a color picker that allows you to apply a full-on color mask on top of your home screen icons. And you can choose the intensity, of course, with the slider and all of that. Now, I guess there's going to be people who are into sort of like making a home screen more aesthetic type approach who are going to like this. They're really not my thing, these tinted icons. I find them, to be completely honest, quite ugly. And even Apple's promotional materials, which in theory, like the Apple website is supposed to make you think that something looks nice, right? And even when I look at Apple's marketing materials, I think, man, that's ugly. Those tinted icons, they're not for me. I really don't. They're not for me. And look, it's fine because you don't have to use it, but the option is there. And yeah, so customization for me this year, there's like half of it that I don't care about, but I'm glad it exists. And the other half, which is Control Center, I absolutely adore. And I cannot wait to see what third-party developers will be able to do with these controls. Controls that are basically buttons that can perform an action in the background in an app, in a third-party app, without opening the app. And I'm really keen to see what third-party developers come up with. Like, obviously, you can install controls that run shortcuts. The controls in the new Control Center are essentially a combination of widgets and shortcuts actions. They're built with WidgetKit, and they use app intents. So they're taking all the things that Apple has built and learned over the past few years with widgets on the lock screen, widgets on the home screen, and shortcuts actions, and they're mixing it all up together with the ability to browse in a controls gallery, which is basically the same as a widget gallery. You can find all controls for Apple's own apps and Apple's own settings. And then eventually you will be able to find controls for third-party apps. And these controls, like widgets, can have multiple sizes. You can resize them on the fly. You can create multiple pages. You can have, obviously there are some default pages that Apple has built for you. There's a dedicated music page, for example, that has a giant music control with an AirPlay menu. There's a dedicated HomeKit page with all your home controls. And there's a dedicated sort of Wi-Fi like radios page with like Bluetooth, personal hotspot, VPN, all that sort of stuff. But the big deal for me is rearranging controls, changing their size, making additional pages. I think this aspect of the iOS experience for power users will be absolutely my biggest time waste this summer in a good way.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's really cool that there's all this optionality and customization available to everybody. I'm kind of like you. I could see myself going for the large icons. I don't like how it almost feels like there's an empty row at the bottom when you go to the large icons because there's a lot of empty space towards the bottom of the screen. But a lot of that is just what I've been used to over the course of many years. So I'm sure I could get used to that. I'm not a fan of the tinting, and that's fine too. I think over the course of the first 3 betas, the dark mode icons have begun to look a little better overall. I think they're still not to my
the dark mode icons look nice.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't felt the need to go to them, but I do think that Apple's done a better job. There's a strange difference between different kinds of icons and how they appear in dark mode. Anything that's kind of skeuomorphic or image based seems to just get be dimmed. Whereas if you've got kind of a high contrast glyph of some sort, think things like the Facebook icon, for instance, where you just have an F on a background, those are more customized in terms of the colors and the darkness than some other ones, like say Pixelmator Photo, for instance.
So that's Control Center. I think obviously we're gonna have to wait and see what third-party developers come up with.
Yep.
But and obviously, if you're a third-party developer and you're adding controls support to your app this summer, send us an email because we'd love to check it out.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by SetApp. SetApp is an app subscription that offers dozens, in fact, over 250 apps for the Mac and iOS. On SetApp, users can get plans to cover only the apps on the Mac or only the apps on iOS or both. With SetApp, users can install and use apps as needed and tackle tasks like file conversion, coding, writing, emailing, editing, working with AI, working with images, videos, and PDF, exploring various Mac maintenance tools and customization tools, as well as apps for security and a whole lot more. Some of the most used apps on SetApp include the massively popular Clean My Mac X, the menu bar customization tool Bartender, a universal converter called Permute, and the easy-to-use screenshot app CleanShot X. You can also get a VPN, battery manager, manage your clipboard, get tools for file management, password management, and much more. Essentially, SetApp saves you the time of researching apps and setting up app subscriptions, and makes finding and trying new tools for your Mac and iPhone stress-free, so you can get things done faster and get away from your screen. Users in the EU might appreciate that SetApp has recently launched a beta of its very own alternative app marketplace called SetApp Mobile. EU iPhone users can subscribe to SetApp Mobile, install it on their iPhone, and browse and install iOS apps available in it directly from the SetApp Mobile app. The iOS app collection on SetApp Mobile is different from the iOS apps available in the desktop version of SetApp. That desktop version of SetApp is available worldwide, and it also packs a variety of AI-powered tools that support the use of major AI models like GPT-4o and DALL-E 3. You can access AI models and apps with your own API key or get an AI Plus plan from SetApp too. One of the AI tools in SetApp that's worth mentioning is PDF Pals. It's an app that lets you chat with your PDFs. You can also find apps to generate text, get real-time assistance in meetings, generate meaningful file names for screenshots, and more. If you haven't tried SetApp yet, you can do so for free with a 7-day free trial. And with the link in our show notes, you can get 20% off SetApp's most versatile Mac Plus iOS annual plan. Go to setapp.com to learn more about this fantastic product, and be sure to use that link in the show notes to get 20% off SetApp's Mac Plus iOS annual plan. SetApp, the place to get apps. Our thanks to SetApp for their support of the show.
Then in the article, I focused on apps. That's really, as I said, without AI, that's really the thing in iOS 18. And specifically, I want to talk about some of the improvements to calendar and reminders, which I'm sort of lumping together because of their new integration.
Mm-hmm.
Passwords, although I think we've spoken about this before. Finally, there's a passwords app in iOS, really on every Apple platform this year. and the redesigned photos. So you tell me, John, where you want to start.
I want to hear more about reminders and calendar first, I think.
Yeah. So much to my surprise, the calendar app has become one of my favorite apps on iOS and iPadOS. And that's because you can now see your scheduled reminders in the calendar alongside your calendar events.
I think that is an important distinction to make because it's the scheduled ones. It's not every single reminder, correct?
Exactly. They're called scheduled reminders. And as I wrote in the story, this is perfect for me because I always assign a due date and time to my reminders. Anything that ends up in my task manager, and that was true of things before, it is true of reminders now, always has a date and a time, always. That's how I use a task manager. And for those wondering, like, why am I using reminders instead of things? It all started because things shortcuts actions broke with the first iOS 18 beta. And so I needed a quick fix. But then I figured with AI coming out soon, it probably is a good investment to try and switch back to reminders because you know there's gonna be something that you can do with Apple Intelligence that you can only do with reminders. I have this feeling that it'll be worth it. And obviously, like, I may be wrong, and in that case, I'll switch back to things, which is I really miss certain aspects of things. But reminders is getting a brand new shortcuts integration according to Apple in iOS 18, and this new calendar integration is really amazing. You can see all of your scheduled reminders alongside your events, and on the iPad, you can use drag and drop to move a reminder from one day to another, for example. And it's not just that you can see your reminders. What I think is interesting, and this is the trend, John and I, we love to spot these trends and talk about them, over time. One of the trends that I'm seeing in iOS 18 is this cross-pollination of apps. And more specifically, this tighter integration with sort of multiple Apple apps sort of being embedded within one another. It started years ago, if you recall, with Apple News content embedded inside stocks.
Oh, yeah.
We all made fun of it.
Yeah,
we all made fun of it.
That probably was the very first one, wasn't it?
It was the very first one. This year, we have two brand new examples of this direct integration. Reminders in calendar is one of them. It really means that not only can you see your reminders, but you can create reminders from calendar and you can edit your reminders from calendar. And when you do, you see a full-on reminders UI. Like you get the actual reminders task editor with like every single property, including URL and attachments, everything. And the second case is Math Notes. So Math Notes are a calculator feature that allows you to, it's basically like Apple's version of Solver.
Right.
It allows you to write down expressions with variables and a mix of plain text. So those live in the calculator, but you can also use them inside the Notes app. And there's a two-way communication between Notes and calculator so that the same document can be accessed from either app. And I think it's a really fascinating idea. And obviously something that only Apple can do, because if you're a third-party developer, you cannot do this sort of stuff. So yeah, calendar and reminders. I'm using the calendar, the reminders integration in calendar a lot, and it's especially nice on the iPad where the Excel size widget on the home screen also can show you both reminders and calendar events at the same time.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great feature. I'm not a person who puts reminders in my calendar. I don't like the clutter, but I know that there are a lot of people who really like that in apps like Fantastical, and so I think it's a great addition to the built-in calendar app too.
Passwords. I mean, I've been saying for years that iCloud Kitchen should have been something more than a settings page, and now it is. And I moved from 1Password for all my personal password management to iCloud Kitchen just before WWDC to get ready for passwords. And as soon as I updated to iOS 18, all of those iCloud Kitchen items sort of seamlessly appeared in the Passwords app. And I cannot even begin to tell you, John, how happy I am with this transition.
It's a great app and it's really solid too. I have not had any issues with it at all.
Yeah, like no more, like as I wrote in the story, like the Passwords app and its autofill integration with Safari and really any app on the system, it completely obliterated an area of frustration from my life, which was my password manager not working, as was the case with 1Password.
Yeah.
Like I just, it's like it went from something that stressed me out to something that I don't think about anymore at all. And it's been a huge relief.
Yeah, that's the problem with password managers is that they can really be a roadblock, and that what I think Passwords gets right more than anything else, which is what it doesn't do, which is it doesn't get in your way. And that I really like. I mean, there are some limitations. You cannot attach files in Passwords like you can in 1Password, and you cannot have notes in there too, which are two features that you and I have used for Mac Stories things in the past. But those are kind of at the edges, really. I think for the lion's share of people, being able to store whether it's Wi-Fi or passkeys or website logins or app logins, all of that stuff works in the Password app.
Yeah. So last, I want to talk about Photos,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of want to know what you think of the Photos app.
I love the Photos app, and I was a little surprised at some early reactions I saw, which I'm sure you'll talk about, that people who didn't like it, because I like it because I know, for instance, this is one of my wife's favorite apps. She spends a lot of time just browsing through family photos, and especially of our kids. And where does she spend that time? She spends it in things like the memories, all the auto-generated stuff that switches over day to day. She sees it on her phone and she watches those little slideshows and then maybe drills into that particular event or date or trip, whatever it is, and browses around. And that's the emphasis with the new Photos app. And so I think it's perfect for a lot of people who use the Photos app that way. I think it's less like a storage system and more like an experience system, I guess is the way I'd put it.
Yeah. I was wrong about it. At first, I thought, Apple is just trying to be fancy with Swift UI just to prove a point. And I went from that to being a total believer in the new Photos UI. And I think it's as I outlined in the story, I feel like it's about balance of these three factors, which is tradition, discovery, and customization.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is that you have your tradition is in the sense that you have your usual Photos grid. It's always shown at the top. You can always go in there, find your photos by, your most recent photos at the bottom of the grid. You can customize the grid. You can swipe down and it goes full screen. The grid is always there. But then you also have like the single page design, going from having to switch back and forth between multiple sections of the app to just scrolling, which is something that, most people are so accustomed to these days. Most people arguably discover things online by scrolling Instagram or scrolling Facebook or scrolling WhatsApp. And so the idea of, instead of moving between tabs and the added sort of mental and cognitive pressure of that, just scrolling feels like on balance, like a better way to allow people to discover stuff. And in Photos, in the new Photos app, what they can discover is collections, memories, trips, which is something that iOS 18 can now categorize for you, featured photos, like all the curation stuff that Apple has been doing for years in Photos, I feel like can be surfaced a lot better and in a way that then makes you appreciate your library more,
Right.
thanks to this design in iOS 18. And lastly, the third factor is the customization of it all. If you don't like what the Photos app shows you by default, or if you just want to make sure that you have shortcuts to sections of photos or specific media types quickly available at your fingertips, you can customize. You can customize the top grid, for example. It's not just a grid, it's actually a carousel. You can swipe it horizontally to move between, to move from the grid to, in my case, for example, the next swipe on the grid takes me to my favorites, and the next swipe takes me to my videos, and the final section is my screenshots. So I have a way to go from my full library to my favorites to screenshots on the other side, and it's very convenient. You can customize your pin collections. You can, something else that I love, Photos now automatically categorizes your photos by day. There's a section called recent days.
Oh, right.
Just below the grid. And that to me, I think it's my favorite change in the Photos. I mean, besides the design, it's my favorite new section because it sort of becomes like a visual calendar of your life. And I don't know how Apple does it. I mean, all these algorithms that they're using, but they pull out a single photo to represent each day. And more often than not, I remember what I was doing on any given day by the key photo that was chosen by Apple. So for example, we recently went on vacation for a few days, and if I open Photos and I see, for example, I go back to July 9 and I see this photo, this beautiful picture of a dessert that I ate, and I see, oh yeah, that day we went out for dinner and I had that chocolate crumble that I loved. I think the recent days section is really effective in making you remember your recent days through Photos. And all of these sections, they have a little arrow next to them that you can press to be taken into a vertical full screen view. I think overall, the Photos app, it's probably going to shock you at first, but my hot take is that I hope that after this public beta, Apple does not backtrack on it like they did with Safari 3 years ago. Safari 3 years ago was a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
This one is not a mistake. This one is a really good design. It makes you discover photos more. It's still as effective at letting you just see your recent pictures as it used to be, but it puts a bigger emphasis on discovery and customization, and it has a little bit of something for everyone, and you should try for a few days, and I think you're going to like it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is one of those things that is going to disorient people a little bit on first launch, which I think is where a lot of people were coming from when they first tried it out. But it does grow on you, I think. And there has been one change in the Photos app during the developer betas that I do appreciate, though, which is the select button is now visible whether you scroll down or not. It was in the early betas, you had to scroll into your grid of photos a little bit before the select button would appear. And just as somebody who's often selecting the last few images in my camera roll in order to do, screenshots and frame them and that kind of thing, I appreciate having the select button there all the time. But like you, I hope that there's no backtracking on this design. I think other than that refinement, and who knows, maybe there's one or two others, I think it's the right direction and a good direction. All right, Federico, thanks for all the details on iOS 18 and iPadOS 18. It's been great to talk to you about all these. I hope people...
Or the highlights.
The highlights.
There's plenty more, but hey, we have reviews to share in September. And it's July. It's not September yet.
It's true. I know you and I are both constitutionally, it's very difficult for us to do previews because we want to dig into every...
I would love to talk about everything, but I cannot.
No, exactly. And there are a lot of little things we haven't spoken about. We will speak about more over the course of the summer and in the fall with our reviews. But I think this is the kind of conversation that should give everybody a good idea as to whether or not they want to take the plunge and install the public beta and give it a try before the fall. So that, I hope we've answered that question for everybody. You can find me and Federico over at macstories.net, We are on Mastodon. Just go to viticci.macstories.net and johnvorhees.macstories.net to follow us there. And we're on Instagram and Threads. Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.